All right, yo, 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 yo. What's up? What's up? What's up? Give up the rock. Hello to my fellow revolutionaries, and happy Friday to all of you of the working class who are just about to endeavor on that one time of reprieve for the working class in our week, the weekend. So, yeah, happy Friday to all of you. Now, now, let us come to the point of today's stream, shall we? Look, there's been a little bit of discussion in the streams over the last couple of weeks now. We've been looking at the history of modern China, which is, you know, very, very interesting. Good morning to you, Reality Pixel Media, and thank you for joining. I've got a few other people on the line, it looks, in the stream. So please don't be shy. Say hello. But yeah, over the last few weeks, we have been systematically unpacking modern China and kind of understanding its place in the capitalist machine, which, surprisingly is not as ultra modern as, you know, the narrative usually lets on. You could make the argument that China was just as fundamental to the creation of world capitalism through the influence on the world market as any European nation or culture was in the development of proto capitalism. But like that's a separate issue. As part of the study into Chinese history and looking at the kind of communist revolution, quote unquote, communist in China, part of kind of the discussion was around like, how the hell did Mao do what he did? Like, how the hell did Mao get together, like hundreds of millions of Chinese people to kind of spread the ideas of communism and then have them coalesce into a revolutionary movement that basically took hold of China and is still technically there today, if not obviously in a very distant form to what Mao had started. And kind of the answer to that was, Mao was in a good position. He was in the National Liberation Army. So that was an alliance between the Kuomintang and like the communists and other like smaller groups, I guess, resistance groups that were looking for national liberation to bring down the colonial powers and to end the, kind of monarchical dynasties within China, end that reign and modernize China. And like another arm or an element that he had, apart from being Minister of Propaganda in this National Liberation Army and movement, was that he developed kind of his understanding of communism through things like basically sitting down with other communists and forming like reading groups almost. He was a librarian by background, the young Mao, which is very interesting, I find. And yeah, he sat down and developed his understanding of communism and theory and revolution from things like reading groups and then sending out kind of communists, people that were, cadre, they would say in the communist terminology. So like people that were trained in revolutionary undertakings and theory and practice. And they would send those people henceforth go to the villages and talk to the people. And like they'd send their armies through, that kind of thing. Like the soldiers would go through, even if it was from the National Liberation Army, or when they broke off from the national liberation kind of movement and like just were under the flag of like of communism, when their soldiers would go through and liberate an area or kind of warn an area that the Japanese are coming kind of thing, they send the soldiers through first, but the soldiers were supposed to be on their best behavior. And so like, peasantry were very used to like soldiers just coming through and, basically laying waste to their villages and stuff like that, taking food, taking whatever they wanted, probably raping and pillaging as they went kind of thing. But like, the communists were disciplined. They left the peasantry alone. They were respectful. And then they'd send in people after that to try and convince people that communism was going to be the way out of their peasantry existence. It was going to lead to a new society where, yeah, people were no longer seen and considered as peasants, And like you'd have more of a liberal kind of society. You should watch Yo Mama Jokes, but the punchline is always Xbox Live vocoded to sirens. Best comedy. Well, thank you, Sick Roach. I will take that on board. Um, Thank you. Thanks for the suggestion. Oh yeah, I'll take that into consideration. But yeah, the the tactic was to kind of show that like the communists as I guess an army and a group were not something to be frightened of, and then to like back it up with like kind of a bit of a propaganda campaign, and they'd go in and they convince kind of the peasantry that like this is the ideas of communism, this is how it can liberate you, and this is how it will change society. And give me the most revolutionary thing you've ever read. Francisco Santiago. The most revolutionary thing that I've ever read. Well, like it depends, I guess. Are we talking about theory or like just like, I don't know, like a meme or something like that? There's a revolutionary channel that reveals the behind the scenes of Brazilian politics. It's in Portuguese though. It's called Sombrevia a Brazil. I'm sure I haven't read that correctly. This was pretty good. If you actually, book. This was pretty good. Like I like the way that they broke it down. This is Revolution and Evolution by James and Grace Lee Boggs. So these are like two American revolutionaries, an American Chinese woman, and American African American guy, I think from like the 50s. And they kind of, I don't know, like they did a lot of work around like revolutionary movements, kind of I guess socialist, communist groups, all that sort of stuff. But also like they worked a lot with like the civil rights movement and stuff like that. So like they were big in like I guess the 60s and like all of that kind of era, that new leftist kind of era almost, but they preceded that. And so they do have like a good exploration of like what it takes to be revolutionary in a modern sense. And when I say modern, you know, it's the 20th century we're talking about here. So like it's dated now. I'm Brazilian myself. It's hell living here. It's pure corruption behind the scenes. Well, you know, behind the scenes, overtly, covertly, it kind of is part of, I guess you would say, the narrative of the capitalist form of production. It sets up political systems, obviously, to meet its own needs. And it's got nothing to do with really setting up like democracy or like, you know, a free society or anything like that. So yeah, corruption is just part and parcel of the game. Like the current president of the citadel of world capitalism, so the emperor of the world, Trump, like, you know, look at him. He's basically a businessman in charge of an entire country kind of thing. So like, you know, what he does is deals. He does deals, and he does a lot of closed door deals. So like, you know, he gets investors in and makes big economic announcements, but he's just cutting deals with the boys and like the American bourgeoisie and the international bourgeoisie actually. And so like, you know, whether they do it openly, overtly, you know, covertly, behind closed doors, whatever, it is kind of whatever refraction variation degree there is to that, like it's pretty much the game. No, dude, Brazil is hell on earth. Rice is made out of gold, and the executives and legislatives don't have any power. The judiciary has all the power. Our president didn't even finish primary school, man. Well, look, you know, I am not surprised when you put it as bleakly as that. It is a very despairing situation that we're living in at the moment. So, are you anti-Semitic? Well, it depends what you mean by anti-Semitic. If you're actually using the proper terminology for that, so people that are actually from the entirety of the region, or like that entire Middle East region, or you're just talking about like from the Levant, or you're talking about like specifically Jewish people. So like you'll have to actually give us some type of delineation there if you're using the actual definition of the word or like a modern version of it. Yo 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 yo, what's up? What's up? What's up? Give up the rock, specifically Jews. No, I am not anti-Semitic. So if that is a really quick way of answering your question, if you want the long story, I can give you a long story. By the way, he used legal loopholes to get out of prison. He was 74 and delayed his sentence to after he turned 75, which is when you become immune to any sentencing. Oh, interesting. Our president literally used a legal loophole to get into his position. Damn, that's too bad. Oh, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but you might have to join another stream if that's what you're looking for. Apologies. Yeah, wow. This is very interesting commentary that's going on in the stream today, not where I thought we were going today, but you know, it takes all sorts. So, yeah, where were we? So we were at the point where, like, I was talking about, like, how Mao used the communist kind of thing and would spread these kind of communistic ideas. And it was about, like, basically or mostly, it was about sending people into areas where people were ready for change. So the peasantry, specifically, and, like, trying to get them to speak about their situations and also encouraging them to basically self-reflect and criticize their own situations to try and develop an understanding, a critical understanding of what was going on for them so they could then make an understanding and like a good choice about whether or not they wanted to join a revolution or not. I was hoping this was the based kind of revolutionary stream, not the gay kind. Well, look, you know, just because it's not anti-Semitic doesn't mean that it's not based. And like it doesn't have to be not gay either. So, you know, why the hell not? Let's go for it. King Xerxes of Persia leads a vast army of soldiers into Europe to defeat the small city-states of Greece, not only to fulfill the idea of one world ruled by one master, but also to avenge what? To avenge what? The suspense. $1 is almost 6 Brazilian reals, LOL. Can't buy any imported stuff. Pay for AS. And anyone that's here to discuss stuff like adults. Yeah, no, this is crazy. How wild are these comments? Press 1 for anti-Semitism in the chat. Ever heard of a Project Bluebeam? Honestly, it's very feasible. It's very feasible, honestly. No, never heard of it. So yeah, the idea was like getting people involved that actually kind of not only were oppressed or looking for some type of societal change, but like people that specifically were developed in their understanding and then could kind of make a proper decision about whether or not to embark on a revolutionary struggle or not. So like Mao understood, or he kind of wanted to get an understanding of how the world, like how revolution would work, by ensuring people were conscious, like, or had a developed awareness politically, and not just being told kind of what to do by, I don't know, dogmatic preachers and like elements of the revolutionary vanguard, and were just like kind of foot soldiers that didn't think, had no understanding of what was going on. It was just dictated to like any other leader, like Chiang Kai-shek, or some type of warlord in China, or maybe one of the officials from one of the dynasties or something like that. So like Mao wanted to develop people's understandings. And this is the point of where we have come to today, which is to kind of set up this idea of a revolutionary reading group, which is like a little bit misleading, let's be honest. This is not a reading group. We're not going to sit down and all read the same book together and talk about like our favorite quotes or our favorite passages. It's really got nothing to do with that at all. But like it's in the sentiment of these initial reading groups that helped kickstart kind of these ideas of revolutionary or communistic ideas in China, as like, you know, the original founders of communism in China had hoped for, like one of those being Mao included. And so, like, this is the type of forum that we want to set up. And, like, you know, it's actually quite interesting that this has happened today in the comment section, because this is the type of stuff that we're looking to kind of encourage here, is a variety of ideas and people kind of commenting on things in a constructive manner, so we can speak about some of the issues that are kind of plaguing society and, like, basically what is to be done. And, like, using kind of Lenin's rhetoric on, yeah, what is to be done. Which is kind of this really fundamental question when it comes to any type of revolutionary struggle, which is what is it that we're trying to achieve here, and then like how do we go about doing that? And like that's why I think it's good to have kind of forums for that type of discussion, because you know there isn't much room for discussion these days in the culture wars. There isn't much room for discussion today in a society that is held up by social media, which basically creates, as you know, other people have described this stream of being, but like, you know, it's true. The like society is kind of held together by separate echo chambers nowadays. So like people don't get to have discussions. MysterE, I honestly support the return of either the Brazilian monarchy or the Brazilian military state of the 60s and 70s. Are we at least pro-fascism? Yeah, we aren't fascists, mate. Yeah. So that's like the point of kind of, you know, setting up, I guess you would say, a revolutionary reading group, is to try and get a message across and like start a conversation, allow all of us to have a forum where we can do these types of things. Because that was how I think it was Jag described things like a week and a half ago in one of the streams. He was like, oh, so like this is the modern version of one of Mao's, you know, reading groups from over 100 years ago. And I guess this would be one of the versions of those types of reading groups, is like sitting in a stream with a bunch of people internationally, might I add, with, you know, people from Brazil, apparently, America, Australia at the moment, and like kind of nutting out different ways that we can approach topics and like kind of flesh out our own ideas. Because that's what I really want to be able to do, is to be able to flesh out and develop our own ideas before we take them into the marketplace of ideas, as liberals would describe it. What do you think of the book I've been reading? Trump. It's Trump, The Art of Negotiation. Don't know, I haven't read it. But yes, that is the point of the stream today. That is the point to develop this type of reading group discussion. And like, I have a question then, in the vein of a reading group and community discussion. I've got a question for you, Sick Roach. How did you find this stream? And why are you in here? And another one for Horace Webb of the same. How did you find this stream? And why are you here? I would know somewhat about why 4IS is here. I would know somewhat about why Reality Pixel Media is here. Recommendations. Interesting. Good old algorithm. Francisco Santiago. Why are you here? I found this stream on my recommendations. Okay. Well, welcome to the stream. And it is quite the motley crew today, let me just say. And there's somebody else, Wyatt Zielinski. Why are you here? Yeah, please tell me why you're here and what do you think you should be getting out of a stream like this. So Sick Roach, you seem to be providing I followed the 4chan thread pointing me here. Clever. Very clever. You're also hilarious, Horace Webb. It's good to have a bit of humor behind you. Um, yeah. And so why are you in the conversation then? I didn't hear I was doing something else. Me? You said you were big on a final solution. Ha, very good. Hilarious. Me, I didn't hear I was doing something else. Organizing. You're here for organizing stuff. So, okay, interesting. Interesting. Well, I'm going to kick us off then with the topic of the day, which is basically along the lines of the death of wokeism. And so, like, I've been developing my own thoughts on this over a long period of time now. I am rather agitated with the way that the left has been taking an approach to social formation and political organization, clothes and etc. And like kind of political life generally. Go to sleep at 11 a.m. I don't know what time it is over there. But yeah, I have taken exception to the way that the left is organizing itself. And like I do believe that it is doing irreparable, oh, I hope not irreparable, but like close to irreparable damage to the revolutionary section of the left wing of the political spectrum, I guess you could call it. And like, I would like to discuss what people's thoughts are about like this issue and like whether people or not have a problem with it. And like specifically, I have been speaking to other leftists. Hold the fort, hold the fort. I'm starting to think this might be some sort of group or communists. If this is a reading group, can we read The Life of William McKinley and the story of his assassination and authentic memorial account, etc., etc.? It's a project, Gutenberg from 1901. No, this is not a reading group. It's not that type of thing. This is a discussion. Reading group is a euphemism that was granted to us in a previous stream. So, sorry if you're looking for a reading group, you're going to have to go somewhere else. What do you think of abortion? I've actually got a separate video on abortion that I put out at the start of the year, actually. And like my opinions on abortion is that it's all about the choice for whatever individual may be undertaking a pregnancy at the time. So like, you know, it should be a choice thing. So if you're pro-life, then I'm assuming that means that you are anti-abortion then. I believe that people should be able to have the choice. So that is women should be able to choose whatever they want to do. So bodily autonomy all the way. And I believe that it is up to them to make a decision about what they do with their child. That is a position like they take on the responsibility and they take on the organic response within their body, which is like developing and growing a life form. So yeah, the responsibility is all theirs. And like when you have responsibility, like anyone in society, an adult or a member, a citizen of a society, when you have responsibility, you have to make choices. And like that's what it comes down to for me. Yeah, I think the video was like at the beginning of the year. I am not a communist. I only came here because I saw a reading group and I thought I was going to be, it's going to be about reading books. Yeah, sorry, it's a euphemism. Sorry to disappoint you there, Jackal. Of how high the idea is in its infancy, we are working out the format. That is true. But what about the child? It doesn't have the conscience to argue for its own life. Well, that's the thing. Like, if you think of pregnancy as a totality, as a relationship between two individuals or two beings that are wrapped up in the same existence, then it's not like a separation issue, like how you're saying. The child doesn't have conscience, so they can't argue if they're in life. You're looking at, you're basically separating life into two entities there. They're working as a totality. And so um, it's hard to describe it using the logic that you've put forward there, to be honest. Do you think vaping during pregnancy is the same as smoking? I have no idea. I would say that like the chemicals are just as problematic between smoking and vaping. I haven't seen any evidence to suggest that vaping is really any healthier than smoking, um, because like yeah, they both are based on you being able to inhale chemicals and put them directly into your bloodstream in order to get some type of, I don't know, hit or something or satisfaction out of that. And so, like anything going through the blood is going to be circulating throughout your entire circulatory system, I guess. So, very interesting question. Jerry Poppins, I'm not going to lie, it's not my usual question on this stream. So, yeah, let's just dial it back, okay? Because we have gone well off topic here. Um, yeah, we're going well off topic here. So, like, yeah, I want to just to pull this back with to the discussion point for this reading group, which again is a euphemism. It's not actually a reading group. So get out now if you think that we're going to start pulling out books. Um, is what has happened to the left. Now, it is my opinion, like I was saying before, that like the left has devolved into a shadow of its former self, and that is because it is kind of floating out on a political sea of the culture wars, I guess you would say, and it has lost any anchorage in anything substantive. Before, it used to be anchored fully within its understanding of class struggle. So the particular fight between capital and labor. So that is a unified struggle between capital and labor. It's not a one-way thing. Like capital fights against labor, labor fights against capital. It is not a one-way thing. And so like to think about like and like the argument against like class struggles is always put down as this idea of class reductionism. So reducing everything to the just to a class struggle is not going to fix the world's problems. And like I agree with that. Humans have a lot more problems than just class issues and class relations. We've got a bunch of gay furry videos. Fair enough. See you later. Um, and yeah, it's more than just a bunch of like class relations. There's a lot of other issues that humans deal with, which is, you know, is all true. But like we live in a capitalist mode of production, and like the core of the system relates to how capital and labor deal with each other. And so it's not just a reducing everything to a class fight of labor versus capital to kind of win the ultimate battle kind of thing. It's more about like this constant toing and froing that happened between these two parties, between the people that like do all the work and produce all the value, and the people that kind of control the economy and want to kind of squeeze that other group and get as much out of them as they can, and then set up the entire system so they can make as much profit from the system as they can, because that is the point of a capitalist mode of production. From this, the viewpoint of the capitalist is that like they just want to profit of everything, and they will set up the entirety of society to kind of basically ensure that profit is met, no matter what the consequences are, whether they basically eradicate the human race, or they wipe out life on Earth, or like, you know, they destroy ecosystems all around the world. It doesn't matter as long as like profit is met. So this struggle for them is real. And like that's why the class struggle is like the main point on which the left should define itself, and it really is the point at which the left used to define itself, which is very important. I think it's very important. Let's do an experiment. What if we divided America into East and West, Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska, South Dakota, North Dakota, and everything west of those states just secede? It's not realistic. No, let's not do an experiment. We're going to be speaking about something else on this stream. And I don't even know what the point of that experiment is, to be honest. If we just divided them, like, and those states seceded, what are you talking about? What do you mean by that? So yeah, I wanted to discuss that in this stream today. But like, it would seem like there's not a lot of people interested in discussing that point in the comments. It seems like there's a lot of separate discussions going on. So like, this is actually why they say that praxis is so important, because like, you can have a theory about what you want to do. Yeah, you can have a theory about what you kind of want to do, but like, you never know what's going to happen until you take that theory and put it into practice. That's where all the difference is. And like, it would seem today that this idea of having the revolutionary reading group has been a little bit all over the place, to say the least, because like, there's a lot of different conversations going on. Yeah, a lot of different conversations going on. So we are going to have a look at a video it comes from the Chris Hedges YouTube channel. And like, Chris Hedges is a radical thinker, I guess you would say. I don't know if he would consider himself a Marxist. I don't think so, but like, he would definitely consider himself on the left, and he's definitely very, very critical of what's been going on in the left over the last, I don't know, 20 years or something like that. And he's got a lady on by the name of Catherine Liu, who is also, I guess, a leftist intellectual. And she is, I think she's recently been on a bit of a crusade to kind of call out some of the problems that she sees with the left. Now, I guess you could say for a long time, the left has really just defined its objective and its public enemy number one as the right, and like, you know, trying to get over and like trying to deal with the problems of the right wing to kind of like a struggle and make a better world kind of thing. And like, they're kind of forming the arguments now that it isn't the right who is the problem that the left needs to surmount. It's actually an internal struggle on the left, and like, the left has kind of lost its way almost. And like, she's particularly, without saying it, I don't think too much in this video, she particularly points out like the problem with like wokeism. And like, wokeism is like an issue that I have, like I was saying before, started to criticize and like kind of point towards and say like, we don't need to do this sort of stuff anymore. We need to let go of wokeism as defined by the right. So we need to stop defining ourselves on the left by taking up battles which are already preordained, predetermined by right-wing think tanks and all that sort of stuff. We need to stop getting involved with culture wars and battles, ideological battles, which, you know, again, they set the ground for, they set the territory for, and like the left, we just get, you know, we take it hook, line, and sinker and just get ensnared in these conversations. And like, and basically the overarching tactic on the right, I guess, is to brand the left as completely detached from reality. And like, I must admit, because of the extreme way in which the culture wars have ended or have ended up, and this extreme way in which, like, you know, woke ideas like get applied to things, like, there is a real good argument to say why the left is completely or not completely, but the left is detached from reality. And if the point of the leftist struggle and the point of being on the left really is to kind of produce some form of solidarity in the working class in order to oppose capital. Like whether that be through, grassroots movements or like, forming unions or like, calling for the revolution even. Um, there is absolutely no intention on the left anymore about like producing some type of working class solidarity. It really doesn't seem like that's an intention at all. It would really seem like the only thing that the left is really worried about is like opposing the right. And like when we on the left have nothing but to define ourselves by what is basically happening on the right, we move into very dangerous territory and we begin to completely dissolve and lose any meaning and therefore any purpose, which is an extremely scary situation to be in. So we're going to listen to what Catherine Liu has to say. She brings up an example of something that I think is a big problem in leftist circles. And like I've witnessed this stuff myself going along to like a socialist conference at a university. And she explains something similar in an organization called DSA, which is the Democratic Socialists of America. She's talking about like how they run things at meetings and how it completely alienates members of the working class that aren't down with like kind of the minutia of like being the most up-to-date leftist and like being the most up-to-date progressive and like the most up-to-date so you can virtue signal in front of your friends. And like if that's what leftism has devolved to, who can be the best virtue signaler, who can be the most woke, like the most enlightened as to everyone's particular oppressive struggle, like who can be the best at being across all of that stuff, then like that is complete detachment from the actual objective of producing a world which is the negation of capitalism, so anti-capitalist. So whatever form that takes, whether it be socialist or communist or anarchist or like some form of like opposition to capital, it will not be founded, that type of world, if that is really still the true objective of the left, is to produce that world beyond capitalism. It will not be produced in like people competing against one another on the left to be the most enlightened, the most woke, and like the biggest virtue signaler as a result of that. And like it's a dangerous race, that to be hyper obsessed about that, to be the most conscious of all of the different problems out there, as opposed to really focusing your energies on one particular struggle. So let's see what Catherine says, and then hit me up in the comments if you have any questions or remarks. That is the point of the reading group, is to listen to this type of stuff, or like a conversation point, and then like comment on it so we can have a discussion about it. So let's have a listen, shall we?
Welfare, 70% of the original recipients were children. I want to talk about the left. And you've been very critical, I think correctly, of the left and how it has essentially cannibalized itself and left us in a very frightening position because, of course, if we go back to the breakdown of capitalism in the 1930s, it was a strong militant left, the old CIO, the Communist Party, that saved us from fascism, which ran like an undercurrent here as it did in Europe. But that left is gone, partly because labor unions have been destroyed. That's been, you went back to when we talked about that period in the 60s or the 50s when you had a rising income and I think we got up to about 36% unionized workers were empowered economically and to a certain extent politically. The Democratic Party certainly had to take them into consideration, and of course that frightened the capitalist class. That was part of the backlash. But now we're
see what he's talking about here. We got to point this out, is that like there was a point in history, in American history, let's say, where like the American workforce was incredibly unionized. 36% of workers were unionized. And so like the Democratic Party, like there's a lot of conversation at the moment is like, oh, why did the Democrats kind of lose the election and all that sort of stuff? And like the Democrats don't represent anything, like they're just running on good vibes and all that sort of stuff. And like that's what the Democratic Party is. Okay, so it's not a workers' party. So like other countries in the developed world have actual workers' parties. The Democratic Party is not. It is just like the slightly more progressive version than of the Republican Party, which are two kind of elements of the oligarchy that kind of controls the America. They're split along different interest groups, so it's not a combined oligarchy or bourgeoisie that control America. There's like some people that align more with the Democrats and some people that align more with the Republicans, but like generally a lot of them will donate to both parties. So it's really just a corporatocracy. And like the Democrats see they will appeal to people that are more progressive minded, and they try to run kind of that venture. It's like 11% now. Yeah, it's so small compared to what it used to be. But like the point that he's making is like when it was like, a third of the population, right? A third of the working population was in there. The Democrats had to take the working class more seriously because like people that were coalescing around their class interests. So this is what I'm talking about. The left has to go back to its kind of its class roots and consider consider the class antagonism between labor and capital and stuff like that. Then like the Democratic Party had to. It was like, they basically its arm was twisted. It's not going to just do this out of a sense of altruism or doing something for the people. That's not how the bourgeois party system works. It is only there to support like the business sector, the private interests in this world. And so they are forced to have to be able to, if they want to appear progressive enough to win those types of votes, they have to align with working class interests. And the power of the union was that, or the working class movement was at that point, at that time. And it was rooted in kind of this understanding of workers, or like the working class coalescing and showing some solidarity around working class interests. It's an important point.
We really are completely disempowered. 11% of the workforce is unionized. I think 6% of them are public
Mitten, you were on fire with that one.
sector. Many of them cannot strike. We saw that with Biden shutting down the railroad freight workers, and the work conditions are just awful. These skeleton crews and very dangerous. Let's talk about the left. What's happened to the left?
Well, what left are you talking about? Are you talking about like DSA? Or are you talking about
This is a good question, okay? And this is what I want to point you to, and I would like to know people's comments or thoughts on this. But like, I think I've been analyzing this for a little bit now, and I think there are two types of left. There is the liberal left, and I use that in the American sense, okay? So like liberal being like someone who is generally socially progressive, but has no problem with capitalism. Like they support the civil rights movement, they support feminism, they are pro-choice. They support socially progressive agendas. However, they are all into, as a result of that, humanizing capitalism. They think capitalism is fine. We can work with it. It just needs to be regulated. It just needs to be dealt with and not changed. And then there is the revolutionary left, I would say, the radical left. And like those are people that are kind of more associated with things like socialism, communism, anarchism, social libertarian movements, which see an actual issue around capitalism. What left are you talking about is basically the backbone of the discussion you're trying to have today. Pretty much. And like I would say that, Jerry Poppins, the revolutionary left that I'm talking about, this section of the left that used to be the anchor point for the left, like even the liberal left would like lean kind of on the revolutionary left to kind of get its talking points and to like coalesce around it to try and like, I don't know, have something to bounce off. Like it would seem that the stakes have moved completely on the side of the liberal left, and they control the conversation because they decide what are, politically correct talking points, what position we're all going to take apparently in the culture wars, and like what defines being ultimately woke, ultimately enlightened to the most progressive ideas. And so like if the revolutionary left is almost completely kind of co-opted by that liberal left thinking, that ideological thinking of like, oh, we got to be progressive here, we got to be the most progressive here, and we got to stamp out anyone who doesn't follow this line. That is a dangerous type of leftism to go down, because it's completely cut off from being held to anything material, and like it just floats off and gets more and more extreme or more and more lost, i.e. detached from the broader working class. And like, the sentiment is definitely that the general working class out there, the average working person out in the world, it would think that the modern left is completely detached from reality. And like the idea of wokeism is something that is anathema to the average person. It's something that is like, oh, you don't want to deal with like anyone on the left because of kind of like this idea of wokeism that has taken hold. And like again, that is a dog whistle of the right, but it's completely trashed the entirety of the left. And so I think it's important how she's just said, look, which left are you talking about here? Because I do see that there's two types. There's the liberal left and the revolutionary left. And like we need to be able to delineate between the two of them and reject strategically the liberal left when necessary, especially with the idea of strategically refounding ourselves within the class struggle. I think we've just lost sight of that completely. I've had many arguments with like self-proclaimed socialists over the years where they're just like, you just don't understand intersectionality. Like it's really important to analyze the almost infinite numbers of forms of oppression out there and see how they all overlap and stuff like that. And so it's like, yeah, it's really good to acknowledge oppression and the problems that it causes, but like don't lose sight of the main objective here. If you really are a socialist or a communist or something like that, then like you've got to be able to oppose capitalism, and you can't do that by like dissecting, how many forms of oppression in like overlap one another in this particular individual, or that particular individual over there, or that, like, or that one over there. Like we need to have solidarity. It's a concept that is being completely lost on the left, unfortunately. Reform was always a poison pill, as Rosa saw, and as we are seeing now in America with the destruction of the few and New Deal programs left. Yes, and this is that liberal kind of left that I was talking about, the new left from the end of the 60s.
Well, I
Dissent
guess
magazine. I
let's
just
talk
read there
about
is no
the
left.
phantom. Yeah, there is no left. The phantom left. Let's talk about the phantom left. Let's talk about what happened. There used to be a left in this country. I mean, go back to the eve of World War One. Debs, the socialists, the Wobblies, and there's been just a steady assault against the left. I mean, the Red Scare, and Alan Schrecker wrote great work on this. I mean, we're at a very, I think, very dangerous moment where those of us who care about some kind of equality and fairness and distribution of wealth and all that, we're completely disempowered.
Yep, yep. I mean, the thing is that so the right confuses the liberals and the left, right? And the liberals actually hate the left. What they imagine is left. I just read um, the Liberal Patriot, that Substack, where he said, it's the leftists who are willing to die on all these hills, like of identity politics and of Palestine, and they're killing. We have to ignore them. We have to go back to the center, and they're actually there's this boogeyman that is powerful in doing these things. The phantom left. And I feel that you know most most left organizations or media that have some kind of power, like Dissent or the Nation or even Jacobin, they've been totally appropriated by liberals. They don't really have a strong materialist edge any longer, and because the thing is that
Welcome, Adam. We're discussing at the moment, as part of this reading group, euphemism. We're just discussing what's happened kind of to the left over the last, I don't know, 50 years, I guess, and what can be done moving forward. We're using definitions at the moment of like left as in liberal left. So people that are socially progressive leaning, but like have no problem with capitalism at all. And then like kind of people that see capitalism as a big problem and want to kind of revolutionize that system, and which is more of a kind of a left that is kind of anchored in some type of material reality. With reform, with elections on the lines, values can shift. Yes, ideology, it shifts all the time. And like it needs to shift. Strategically, you need to be able to shift your ideas on things to be able to maintain your focus on the primary objective. Because like strategically you might need to make an alliance over here or get this person on board over there, and so you shift your ideas around a little bit to maintain focus on the objective, which is bringing down this capital labor social relation, which causes a lot of antagonisms. But like you need to be able to shift your thinking and shift your ideas. So if you focus yourself in being so strong in your ideology and your ideas around something that you can never let go of them, and you have to get progressively more extreme in your ideas to show how virtuous you are, that's a fucking problem. But if you can show how virtuous you are by maintaining some type of material relation, so in a class struggle, and show how virtuous you are by sticking up for your class interests, the people that like represent your own economic position, your economic reality in society, that is something that doesn't really change. It's an anchorage point, and like the ideas can change around it, but like if you stayed fast in your mission from an economic standpoint, then you can really do a lot of damage, and you can really change the system that way, as opposed to just like changing with whatever's trending at the time.
that the politics of identity have become so pitched that nobody wants to criticize what has happened with the Democratic Party and human resources appropriation of identity politics to divide us on the and make us ignore the material questions that really should be preoccupying us. Like every day, we should be talking about private equity. But if we're talking about DEI and we're talking about like not underrepresented minorities, and we're talking about
That's a really big call that she's just making there, because like at the moment, if you listen to kind of the liberal media in America, like it's all about DEI. It's just like Trump is really bringing down the house when it comes to DEI and stuff like that. And while this is a tragedy in the sense that like, you know, there are protections for people so they're not discriminated against, there is obvious issues with DEI in the sense that like it undermines like the merits of individuals. And so like that is something that the liberals left, I think, cannot reconcile. The contradiction between like setting up a system that attacks or destroys discrimination, like institutionalized discrimination, but as a result of that sets up a system where you forget about people being like, you know, considered based on their merits. And so like that contradiction, the contradiction between merits and discrimination is fully on the side of undermining the meritocracy now, the merits of being an individual in a particular system, your merits as an individual. And if that is being completely undermined now because of like things like DEI and like stuff that the right wing will call wokeism and stuff like that, and that has been associated with the right, like the right, is being associated with the left now because of the right and right wing attacks. And like people are just like, well, like, you know, things like DEI, things like wokeism, things like being left, they don't care about the merits of the individual. They don't care at all. That is a direct attack on the working class, because the working class are people that have to live off the sale of their labor capacity in exchange with capital. So they have to go out and like try to survive in the system. And if like their merits mean nothing anymore in the wake of someone getting positions based on what attribute their identity has associated with them, that is a fundamental attack on the working class. Or it is an attack on lots of people, but it is contrary to the interests of the working class. And that's why you have working class people disassociating with the left and finding that the left is detached from reality. Now, they don't explicitly say that here, but they will form and make those types of arguments that this type of stuff, this new leftism, this liberal leftism, is actually an attack on, or actually supports the bourgeoisie or the capitalist class in their attack on the working class. And like, we'll watch another video where she kind of makes this case, but she doesn't articulate it exactly the way I am there, but it's something to consider.
Equity and not equality, we're not going to be talking about what private equity is actually doing to every single sector of the American economy. And I think that even like the left journals who have been representative of a certain more materialist point of view, it's been very, very hard to get traction with that, because immediately if you criticize the identity politics aspect of liberal politics, you're called a racist, you're called a transphobe, you're called, a nationalist. So it's been really, there's no.
It is a profound quote for us. Yes, all people are born equal, just some are more equal than others. Anti-discrimination is antithetical on the American dream. If your goal is power, then strategically you'd want to shift your values. This is interesting because like what she's talking about here is like, if you say anything that goes against that kind of liberal left idea of identity politics, you get attacked for you get discriminated against for being discriminatory, which is a paradox, right? It's very ironic.
Because immediately if you criticize the identity politics aspect of liberal politics, you're called a racist, you're called a transphobe, you're called, a nationalist. So it's been really, there's no traction to create like a liberal left dialogue that can actually produce an alliance like the Tea Party and the mainstream GOP that moved the Republicans to the right over the past 25 years. If you can't have that productive antagonism, and you have one side saying you guys are all just demonic because you criticize our positions on identity, and the left can say, like people like me or people like you who take the risk to say, these DI policies, they destroy solidarity, they destroy any kind of class solidarity or class feeling. They're designed to manage difference rather than produce equality and justice. We, systematically get marginalized by the left powers that be. I'm never going to get a grant from Guggenheim, Mellon, or MacArthur. I don't fucking care. But they really do control what can be said on the, in a professional sphere, because we're in the media, we're in academia, and there's no, I'm happy to go on Fox. I'm happy to go on CNN. I'm happy to go and tell people that there are people in the world who identify as the left who don't like this culture wars thing, who do feel like we are gotten far, far away from the values of the working.
I've got to say that I really do agree with what she's saying. I'm worried about like the way that the culture wars have developed, and like you could argue that this is in reaction to what the right wing have done, so it's really their fault. That's fine, but like the way that the left has reacted to it is to double down and just basically silence anyone that opposes it, and this is a big problem. Silencing your opposition is a massive issue in a society, in a democratic society, because you're supposed to be able to air out ideas. And like you're supposed to allow people that take up a contrary position to you air out their ideas so that you can't shoot them down in flames if they say something that is just stupid, like, and like, you know, is fundamentally wrong. But like if you just silence people, then like that is, it is kind of antithetical to the idea of political freedom in a democratic sense. You need to allow people of all sorts to voice their opinions, say whatever the hell they want. So, one, you can develop your own ideas, and two, you can call people out when they have dangerous or stupid ideas, and you can shut it down as a community, as a collective, as opposed to letting people just run away with stupid ideas. You silence them, then they go underground and they start some fucking, I don't know, hard right movement, and then just like want to take over the system for all the wrong reasons. If you think you are better than other people, you are inherently beneath them. That is an interesting concept. If you think you are better than other people, you are inherently beneath them. Yeah, just the thought of it itself, the idea that you are better, makes you inherently beneath them. I subscribe to that. Like, you can't automatically think that you're just better than people. That is the virtue signaling of a liberal, like, kind of leftist idea, which is just like, no, we are right on this no matter what. And like the more extreme they get in like what's right, what's correct, and all that sort of stuff, they start to silence more and more people. And it's just a form of elitism. It's just a very warped mental gymnastics version. True, but people are pretty good at sussing out when people are being talked down to. They are. They are. And I think that's the general sentiment of the working class at the moment. They are definitely got the vibe that they are being talked down to by the left. And so there's that feeling of detachment, which is what we've been talking about, like complete detachment from reality and detachment from like the working class. Like, holy shit. What a sad day it is for the left.
In class, which should be about bread and butter material issues. Why isn't that voice out there? It should just be out there. Something that we don't demonize, that we feel like we have to contend with. The class issue. And also the question of whether or not we can have a strong left without a strong industrial base. And that strong industrial base has been destroyed. And how do we actually rebuild that? And we should be asking this question too. Is a white collar union as good as a blue collar union? You know, I would say no, but it's still a union, right? But we should be talking about these things. And the other thing about it is class is not a moral category. I don't use it to demonize people when I go, you know, this is a PMC position. People are like, oh my God, you have a degree from an Ivy League school, you're a professor. It is not a moral position. It is a social position. And as a social position, its political valence can change depending upon the social situation. So there are people who believe that the professional managerial class can become a progressive force. I do not, but we can have this discussion. We can air it out. I don't believe that we should lead with vanguard identity positions. When I suggested this on Twitter in the middle of the pandemic, my erstwhile friend Doug Henwood led a Twitter mob on me who excoriated my position, said I was a transphobe, told me to kill myself, and this was immediately silenced. Like, people were in my DMs going, they scared the shit out of me because I thought I was just saying, like, maybe DSA shouldn't start the meetings with what I called the pronoun ritual. And the attacks on me were insane. And all
Blue collar represent. What she's talking about here is really, really important. Okay, so we're talking about starting a meeting of the Direct Socialists of America, a group which is supposed to represent working class interests in the struggle against capital. And she's saying they shouldn't start their meetings basically with the whole pronoun ritual, which is like everyone talks about, like, you know, how they identify and all that sort of stuff. And she was ferociously attacked, and like people telling her to go kill herself and all that sort of stuff. And like, you know, you usually hear that liberal defense of capitalism under the excuse, under the ex, liberal defense of capitalism under the excuse capitalists can defend liberal values is an impediment on progress. And so like that's what she's kind of describing, in the sense that like she's come up and said like we should be letting go, or like, you know, not getting lost in these strange rituals of like of self-identity proclamation, and just like keep it to the class struggle and class issues, working class kind of stuff, to not alienate certain people that aren't interested in identity politics and just like are there for the workers' struggle kind of stuff. And like, yeah, she got death threats. She got like people telling her that like she should kill herself and all of that sort of stuff. And like, so goes the tolerant left kind of thing. And like, you know, this is something that I fucking hate when I hear right-wing people say it. You know, he's another person on the tolerant left, but like, there's a really good reason to make a call like that, a scathing call like that, because, you know, there's a lot of validity to the idea that like if someone has an opinion like hers, and like the left's reaction to it, or people's reaction is for her to go kill herself, then like it's not very tolerant, this idea, or inclusive, which is kind of the idea of working class movements, is they show solidarity, and they work together to meet their objectives. It also works both ways. The elite class have been brought up to believe they are better than other people, and probably not always their fault, more a problem with the system that we are born into. Yeah, it's an interesting point, and like something that Marx talks about a bit in the Grundrisse is kind of this idea that capital, like the capitalist class, capitalists are alienated under the capitalist system, and like they don't even really want to do some of the stuff that they do in the name of profit, but they kind of have to, because if they don't do it, somebody else will do it, or if they don't do it, they'll just be cannibalized by the system, and they'll lose their position in the social structure and the hierarchy. So they must like race to the bottom of the profit game, and like who cares what destruction they do in the meantime. So like even the elites are kind of in a precarious position where they're forced to make choices which they might see as morally objectionable, but like they'll do it anyway because that's the system.
All I had said was I told him an anecdote about a friend of mine who had brought a group of union workers, hotel workers, to a DSA meeting, and these women left quietly before the introductions were done because they took so long with the pronouns. People said, "Have you ever been misgendered? You're a transphobe." I was thinking about my aunt, who is a member of Unite Here 11. She barely speaks English. She loves her union. If she was brought to a DSA meeting and people are introducing themselves with pronouns, she would be thinking she's getting an English lesson after work. And she would want to go home and spend that time with her husband and make dinner for her daughter, right? What is the political meaning of that? To a person, every single Chinese person I know is constantly misgendering everyone because we only have a neutral third person pronoun, right? So what does that mean to her? What does a DSA meeting mean to her if people are using this strange ritual that has nothing to do with what she thinks of as the benefits of her union? She loves her union. She doesn't need DSA. So you see right there, DSA is playing this liberal vanguard position and making it impossible for immigrant women like my aunt to even understand that unionism and leftism might actually have something to do with each other, because DSA is already playing vanguard identity politics. And people called me the worst names possible. And I was just saying, and I challenged them. I challenge them to tell me if they have a fucking family member in the Unite Here 11.
Damn. She was upset. But like it's interesting like how she's described it as like the DSA, so socialist organizations, people that I think are supposed to be like kind of the vanguard of revolutionary movements, because I've had this run in with socialists or self-described communists or revolutionaries and all that sort of stuff as well. It's kind of just like it's basically just about vanguard, being on the vanguard of identity politics. So I just was describing it before as being like as the most optimal at virtue signaling and being the most across the various forms of oppression and being like the most like the ultimate in being enlightened and woke to the different forms of oppression, which is important to be cognizant of, but it's not a fucking arms race. And so she calls it the vanguard. So like these political organizations, these groups like the DSA, the Democratic Socialists of America, which is a large organization, are isolating the working class or separating themselves from the working class when like they give primacy to these types of identity-based issues as opposed to concentrating on the working class struggle. So like if you have a bunch of union workers that rock up and have absolutely no interest in identity politics at all, they're not going to be able to draw a connection between like what it means to be a unionized and organized worker and like the left, the idea of the left, which these two things are born out of the same like fire. They're forged out of the same fire. But like because this organization has taken a, as she would describe it, a vanguard position in identity politics, then like they can't make a connection with, okay, I'm in a union and I'm trying to fight for my own class interests here, and the left. They think the left is just this kind of amorphous ideal and like set of ideas and principles about like, you know, certain rituals and like how you describe yourself and something like that. I think it should be made clear the ideas within themselves are good values, yes. But when they get co-opted and cause such contradictions, you have to ask yourself, are they useful? And that was like kind of the thesis that I'd been making previously, is that like there's nothing wrong with the ideas, there's nothing wrong with being anti-discrimination, and there's nothing wrong with not wanting to be a douchebag. But like, you know, these things don't take primacy. And like if it is detracting from the overall objective, which is the fight against capital, which is the traditional fighting ground of the left, if it is detracting from that at all, and even like destroying it, not just distracting from it, completely obliterating it, then we need to go soul searching here and redefine ourselves, re-anchor ourselves in the battlegrounds of our choosing. We can win so many more battles and like draw so many more people to the cause, like working class people, the people that we want to win over in the fight against capital and like, you know, revolutionizing the system, if we go back to our roots and let go of the liberal vanguardism that she's described here, the identity politics vanguardism that she's described here. Now, before I get on to the next one, I am going to do what I usually do, which is a shameless plug. And so, like, I think we've got a few new people in here. So I'm just going to let you know that there is a Discord server that we have, which like kind of allows you to continue these types of conversations when we're not doing streams. So go over and here's the invite. Go over, do yourself a favor, join the Discord server. Here's the invite. And if you want to get notifications about this stream and like the other content that I do, then like you're going to want to go over and become a member for free. That is absolutely for free. There's no financial investment required, but if you want to do that, you can go over to the Patreon so you can get actual notifications from me. Social media doesn't give notifications, let's be honest. The algorithm doesn't work like that. It only gives out notifications where it suits its own purposes. So if you want to get notifications, please sign up and become a member on Patreon for free. So here we are. She's back again, Catherine Liu, and she's speaking to this guy from Dime Radio about the same type of stuff. And like she articulates again here in like about a 3 minute segment. I haven't finished watching the whole thing, but she articulates here in about a 3 minute segment like this problem that's going on in the left, why it's out of touch, what it needs to kind of remember about itself, and what it needs to re-engage in. So let's have a listen to what she's saying here, and I'll get your thoughts on that, and we'll see what people are thinking.
Today. And now, like, I'll get, I'm very combative, so I'll get into Twitter fights. It's kind of silly. I do it for entertainment, but people be like, "You're a Yaley, you're a midwit Yaley," and it's like, I went to Yale, so what? Make arguments about what people are saying, not about their identity. They're so trapped in resentment and identity that they can't see that, oh yeah, you're PMC yourself. It's like, this is a position, objective.
Professional managerial class is what PMC is. It's an abbreviation, an acronym that she uses in like a recent book that she's written, apparently, about like this topic of the professional managerial class has caused basically this style of leftism that I am taking opposition to at the moment, which is kind of this liberal elitist kind of social progressiveness. So wokeism, identity politics, the height of the culture wars, they have started like all of this stuff, and it's like inherently in the interests of the capitalist class and the bourgeoisie, because it helps split the working class into many, many sections, and like helps kind of people be basically discriminated against. And so, like, yeah, if you see her using PMC, that's, yeah, professional managerial class, is a term of people that are particularly actually part of the working class because they labor for a wage, as opposed to living off like their investments or something like that. But like they sit there as this middleman, this conduit between, kind of, I guess you would say, capitalists and people that work, like working people, and they kind of tell everybody how they should be thinking, what's right and what's wrong, and all that sort of stuff. And they kind of work against their own class interests, and they work for the interests of capital.
Within society that I occupy, you occupy a different position from me. There's nothing inimical or innately bad or good about our positions within society. The capitalist is neither bad nor good, but he does they do terrible things socially to protect their interests and increase the rate of profit. So they are the enemy of the worker. Can we see that in a way that isn't like made into a liberal passion play? We need that kind of objectivity. I get so upset though reading about private equity these days, but you just have to understand their logic and how to stop it. But we can't. We're so caught up in culture wars that we're like, oh my God, they're so evil. Let's stop it. And all of this display, the virtue signaling that I'm talking about, has replaced any kind of like objective, incisive political action.
See, this is, I think, potentially a problem with social media, is that like the virtue signaling is way more important than actually looking at like an objective form of struggle. And so like, you can show everybody on social media how awesome you are, if you're a lefty or someone who's socially progressive, by saying like how much you stand up for something and how much you fight for something else, by like changing your profile picture to be a certain color, or like telling everyone like, kind of like, posting about like stuff that you think is progressive or important to you, or even demonstrating how you get involved in certain movements by who you associate with. And all of this can be done performatively on social media, as opposed to having any kind of reality to what's happening on the ground. And like that kind of that sense of performativeness echoes throughout like the real world as well, and so people become more performative in real life and want to focus more on the performative aspects of like progressivism, and like taking action against certain issues, because like it's part of your own self validation, as opposed to looking at like kind of an actual strategic objective, like, you know, fighting against capital, or like looking out for other people, like working people that have your own class interests, even if they're people that like don't agree with you on certain issues like identity politics stuff. Like you can still fight for them anyway, but like you don't get any brownie points for that like in your little cliques, and you don't get any brownie points for that online. And so like this culture, this fear of missing out, which is perpetuated by social media, is the same type of culture, I dare say, that perpetuates this kind of liberal left understanding of the world, and kind of woke sentiment, or this increasingly extreme woke ideal and battleground, which like the left seems to want to take up in opposition to the right, but like it ultimately, I would say, and these days defined by the right, co-opted by the right. And so like we're completely lost and destroyed in that fantasy.
Or analysis. Oh my God, I just talked for so long about your simple question. I'm sorry.
There's a lot to pick apart there, but I think for the audience, right, I think we should demystify parts of the argument at a time, because one of the rebuttals I always see to the PMC thesis, which I find very annoying, is when people say, well, isn't that just so this is the Marxist rebuttal, which is,
Yeah.
well, it's not really an economic class because they're wage earners. And if they do accept that they're different from like, working class people, they'll say, well, isn't that just petite bourgeoisie or maybe labor aristocracy? And I would guess it's kind of closer to the latter, but I guess maybe what makes the PMC distinct as a class sociologically and economically, because correct me if I'm mistaken, the way I understand the PMC, it's not just literally the class position. That's a major component of it, but it's also sort of a mode, because students tend to exhibit a lot of the tendencies of PMC individuals. And I went to school with plenty of students who, they worked multiple jobs. They would be servers here, baristas there, but would exhibit all of the tendencies you would see with PMC people. But in a very literal sense, they're kind of working class, but in a sociological sense, they're closer to the PMC. And I guess all that's kind of, I would be curious for clarification, because I think people think that you're making a very like rigid class identity argument when you're not. So I want to give you the chance
Right.
to demystify.
So it's an ideological position with regard to wage work, right? That you feel like you are part of a vanguard, enlightened group of wage workers who are thought leaders with regard to the majority of the population. And this is something you're taught in college. So even if you're a barista and you've been to like gender studies seminars, you're like, yeah, I have pink hair, so I'm just more enlightened than you are. I'm just more fluid about binary oppositions than you are, which is like, I think the most identitarian vanguard PMC position you can take. But one of the things that has happened is that the ideological machinations of capital have gotten more complex. And I think that that's why I'm committed to Frankfurt School analysis, and people, the orthodox Marxists don't like this very much, but the Frankfurt School analysis of the culture industry is one way of understanding why there hasn't been a revolution under capital, because there's an ideological reproduction of the status quo, let's just use that big left phrase, and that that ideological reproduction takes people and fits them like gears into the machine. So one thing that we could say about these people you're describing is that their identification is with the values are aspirational with the values of the PMC elite. So even if they're doing this work that, characterizes them as service workers, I don't know if they're blue collar, they're aspiring towards like getting a job at a publishing house, in an NGO, becoming a freelancer for, a liberal ad agency. Just their aspirations are to move. This is a transitional moment for them, and so they have to espouse the values of this class they are aspiring to enter because they have the credentials. Your generation has been screwed because the barrier to entry to these white collar jobs are more and more pronounced. Maybe not in Canada, but in the United States, it's harder and harder to get those jobs. So we have an overproduction of college educated people.
So, like, I think there's an important point going on here in terms of like class relations. So, like, I think they've taken the view here that like orthodox Marxists, whatever that really means, would like be antithetical to taking up and describing any more subsets or different types of classes within society than already exist in the defined struggle, which is between capital and labor. So you have the working class, you have the capitalist class or the bourgeoisie, and you have kind of I guess the lumpen proletariat then and the petty bourgeoisie. So you have classes outside of that. So you have these distinct and already defined classes, and you can't vary from that. Now, I would argue that that's not what what Marx would have talked about, but I think like orthodox Marxists is a term that is actually describes the people that came kind of after Marx, and were the first people to describe themselves as Marxists, and they're very rigid in their interpretation. But that's the point. It is their interpretation of Marxism, or what it is to be a Marxist. And this is exactly why I don't describe myself as a Marxist. If someone would have asked me that, I would say, hell no, I'm not a Marxist. I'm just someone who reads Marx and tries to learn from his critical analysis of capitalism, because it is pretty fucking useful. I don't see anyone else that has given such a comprehensive criticism of capitalism. So an orthodox Marxist might not like what someone like her is doing, which is breaking down the working class into different subsets, and they would have already had a name for it, like labor aristocracy, as she described before, or like there was a couple of other terms that she threw around in terms of like class interest. But like a class, just to paint the picture for everyone, just so we're all on the same page here, a class is an interest group. So in the material sense, like a historical material sense, you really have only some really set and defined broad-reaching kind of groups, some overarching kind of groups. And like in the capitalist system, like the core relation is between the people that own the means of production, so the capitalist class, and then the laboring class, the people that have to do all of the work for everyone else to survive off. And so like, you have those two distinctions. But like an interest group, if you look at a class as an interest group, which is another material relation, you can have many subsets within various interest groups of people that have shared interests, because interests are real and material things, because they relate to groups of people who kind of have a sense of collectivity. They coalesce around a certain issue. They collect around a certain issue. So like if she's describing this professional managerial class, but they're also wage laborers, so technically they're in the working class, but they're a separate interest group to the majority of the working class, because they see themselves as like professionals that stand above, and they like, spout all of this kind of ideological warfare, and they really see themselves as above everybody else, which Reality Pixel Media pointed out to quite aptly before. That's when you see yourself above people, really in reality you're beneath them, because you're just an elitist wanker, which is what a lot of these people do. But they have a separate kind of interest, because a lot of these people exist in the higher portion or the higher end of corporations, the higher end in universities, the higher end in like managerial structures of large organizations. So like if you look at their interests, usually they align around the fact that they're a professional / managerial class. An alt definition of wokeism is, right, though the way you can connect to people's level, peeps should just say, you're anti-capitalist. Yeah, that's why I like to use the definition or the term anti-capitalist, because at the end of the day, that's what the struggle is really about. It is the struggle against capital, and everything else is kind of just like a refraction of what that is technically about. An alternative definition of wokeism is to take advantage of left ideals to make money or make yourself look good. That's a pretty apt definition, I must say. To take advantage of leftist ideals to make money or make yourself look good. It's all about kind of social kudos in a way, and whether that comes from the social power of money or the social power of status. It would be taking advantage of these, yes, leftist ideals and progressivism to cement your social standings. It's easy to define yourself by what you're not. That's a very Hegelian notion there, Jerry Poppins. You philosopher, you. That's why I mentioned cultural capitalism earlier in this stream. Yes, I like telling people that Mussolini, who was the first fascist, called it corporatism. Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Yeah, he loves his corporate state, the merging of corporates, and the state apparatus. The bank flies a queer flag, makes me think every time. Damn, where was it going? Oh, but sorry, class interests, PMC. Yeah, you can have different interest groups as subsets within a larger group. Like you could argue, like there's always a distinction that people have, and like a question about, oh, what does the proletariat actually mean? So like, there is a subset there. The working class is generally the people that, kind of work for a living. But like not all of those people produce surplus value, which is what the whole capitalist system, the whole capitalist system actually survives off. It is only the people that come into contact with capital, so they make surplus value for capital, are engaged in that relation, that produce all of like the GDP that everyone actually lives off. And like the entirety of the working class is not proletarian. The proletarian is, like I said, a very particular subset, I would say, of the working class. And like some would even go as far as to say it's not just any capitalist that you can work for, it's just industrial capitalists. That's where the proletariat comes from. And so like there are subsets within like the larger and broader class interest groups. And so like if orthodox Marxists have a problem with that, like I would argue that these orthodox Marxists and stuff, like they haven't read a lot of Marx. But like they've sat in their own little groups and decided what is an orthodox Marxist and what isn't. So like Jerry Poppins said, like they kind of define themselves as to what they're not. As opposed to like defining themselves in what is in Marx's actual text. So what causes you support? Have you actually done anything to contribute to that community? Yeah, massive profits, lol. But we keep them. Profits for me, losses for we. So like that's as far as I want to go with Catherine Liu today. But like this is what I really wanted to speak about today, is like setting up this kind of idea of a revolutionary reading group, which doesn't have to be like a defined thing, but it has to be the sentiment of these types of streams, which is like to come up with kind of ideas and continue the interaction and the discussion, to make sure that people feel like their voices are being heard, and like they're contributing to what we're talking about. Commonwealth Bank just made 5 billion profits. Biggest bank market cap in the world. Interesting. And yeah, if people want to continue that on Discord, you know where to go, kind of thing. So yeah, I wanted to just establish that idea of the reading group being like this type of stream just generally, and people making sure that they're coming to these streams armed and ready to like comment and bring ideas that we can all speak about. That was more the intent. And so I think that has really blindsided a lot of people on thanks to the algorithm who was trying to get people in here on the premise that this was going to be an actual reading group, and people left when they found out they were not actually reading books today. And there's some pretty fucking wild comments in the earlier half of this stream, that's for sure. Wild is an understatement. So yeah, look, I'm going to leave it there, but I still want to develop this idea of the new left, like the issues with, yeah, how were those early comments? Oh my God, they were mental. They really were. I wasn't sure what was going on, to be honest. Yeah. But like, you know, that's what we do here though. We have many different groups of people coming in, and different forms of opinion being voiced. So we're open to it, obviously, if it's relevant though. And some of that stuff was not relevant at all, in the slightest. But like, you know, funny in retrospect. The thing is, we need to work together with those people. Yikes. Yeah, yikes. But like, you know, I don't think like they were actually interested. Like, remember we had a situation like last week or something like that with Ken Oath, and like he wanted to debate why he thought we were all living in an echo chamber, and why he all thought we sucked, and like socialism was a bad idea. He actually wanted to debate. Like, these people just wanted to, like, one of them was just talking about like being anti-Semitic and like trying to get lulz out of talking about the final solution and stuff like that. So like, I don't think they actually wanted to talk. So like, we don't have to work with those people, just with people that are actually interested in like talking about these types of ideas. Oh, and critiquing them, for sure, critiquing them. But like, yeah, if you just want to have a bit of a laugh, like about like the final solution and stuff like that, then like there's not much we can do with that. It's just rather distracting. And like, you know, I'll have to make decisions in the future about whether or not to kick people out of streams, if they're just being idiots, as opposed to actually trying to challenge us on our ideas, which is very much welcomed. Yeah, thanks. It was kind of funny though. Like, some of them I wanted to engage, like the Brazilian one. I was like, oh, where's this one going? But they seemed to be upset with Brazilian society, but still very conservative in their own opinions anyway. So yeah. But yeah, thank you everyone for coming along today. That's it. I'm going to call it a little bit early today on today's live stream. But like I said earlier, you know, enjoy your weekends. I know that might not be for everyone. The Americans have still got a bit of time before the weekend, but for us Australians, it is Friday. And like, that's a big day of celebration usually for the working class. The day before we generally get freed from our laboring obligations to the capitalist class. So enjoy your weekends, enjoy your time off to recuperate and rest, so you can bring your labor capacity back to the labor market next week. And we will continue the conversation next week. I haven't decided what topics we're doing, but if anyone wants to put stuff in Discord and talk about what type of topics they want to research and discover, then like, you know, I am all ears. But we'll be back on Monday on YouTube with another stream. And yeah, try and develop this reading group a little bit more. I might not put the word reading group in a YouTube thumbnail anymore, because it gets people a little bit too excited, I think, especially if they think we're actually going to be reading something. But I want to leave you with a quote from this book that I was talking about earlier, which is like, I know I've spent a lot of time talking about like how it's important to like put ourselves or focus only on the class struggle kind of thing, and like get rid of any other ideas or like things that distract from that movement. But like, in no way am I trying to diminish the importance of like other forms of struggle. I just think like primarily we should define ourselves as anti-capitalist, and like that should be our core objective. And so like we should really think about that, and like kind of define or anchor ourselves in that. And so like I want to just talk about this idea of oppression. And it comes from this book. So it's Revolution and Evolution in the 20th Century by James and Grace Lee Boggs. They were a revolutionary couple, which is interesting. And they wrote books together. They were a married couple and they loved revolution and they wrote books together, which is kind of cute. Maybe, one day I'll marry myself a little revolutionary and we'll write books together. So many radicals, consciously ignoring the profound questions raised by Lenin after the Russian Revolution, still believe that all one has to do is eliminate oppressive institutions with one audacious blow and the oppressed masses will automatically change. Many people still continue to believe that human behavior is completely determined by objective conditions. So this is what we've been speaking about, like human, like the objective conditions being your class position. And like if you eradicate the class issue, then like somehow like all of the problems will go away. But like they're specifically talking about human behavior here. And I think there's a point here that like many people still continue to believe that human behavior is completely determined by objective conditions. Now, the behavior and the actual material relations are two different things. And like through the practice of revolutionary struggle, however, the Chinese have developed the strategy of struggling simultaneously to transform both institutions and people. The oppressed are an integral part of the system which oppresses them, unless they break loose of that system. Therefore, until they begin to change themselves, i.e., to become self-determining rather than determined, they cannot get rid of the oppressive institutions. So like what they are talking about here is this idea that like you can have all the class struggle that you want and you could bring down capitalism, but people won't, like you could bring down capitalism tomorrow, but people won't understand what the hell that means because like they're so used to capitalism. They are, as oppressed people, are also implicated in their own oppression because they help allow it to continue by enacting a world where oppression in that form is lived out by the entirety of the population. And so like that's the importance of like a reading group like this, or like what we're doing here by educating ourselves and talking about this stuff, is like we need to kind of enlighten people about the workers' struggle and why we fight against capitalism and stuff like that. And we will not be able to do that in the face of like this vanguard liberalism that she was talking about before, like these enlightened or woke individuals that just want to be the vanguard of wokeism and like virtue signal at the top and like take precedence over the class struggle. We should be focusing our energies on helping people see their material reality, that like they are part of an interest group called the working class, and the struggle is against the bourgeoisie and like ending the entire system. And once they start to see themselves as working class and see themselves as locked in this eternal battle against the capitalist mode of production, which just sees them as a cog in a wheel to extract value from, then when they start to see that, then they will be able to not only change the system, but live in a world where that system is changed. And like that is a fundamental and massive thing. Like we can't just as a vanguard like destroy world capitalism. Let's just say all of us in this chat, this stream right now, were superheroes and like we ended world capitalism tomorrow. Like it would just continue because the oppressed out there, the large majority of people, wouldn't know what to do with themselves, kind of thing. They'd just be like, oh my God, I want to go back to work. Can I just go back to work, please? So like our job is to not be distracted by identity politics and the culture wars, which are predicated on proper issues, things that we should be concerned about, but like they unfortunately detract from the ultimate objective, which is the struggle against capitalism. And so like we need to spend our time allowing people to come into the working class movement and educate themselves and understand them, like what the working class movement is all about. We need to like break down barriers to that and allow people to come in and like start to understand what their struggle is and what their class interests are. And yes, we're not going to be able to do that if we appear as this group which is completely detached from reality. Completely detached. I see that point working in the way that if we keep buying from corporations and watching TV, consuming social media, we keep their control over us. Yes. And like this is the ideology that continues to perpetuate itself. Like the capitalist machine will just continue to produce ideas and culture and thoughts that maintain the status quo, which is what she was talking about before, which she said, oh, you know, that's from the Frankfurt School. It's a postmodernist understanding of Marxism, or like a postmodernist way of looking at the world. But like, that's exactly how Marx would have described it. I've read it in his own work where he talks about how capitalism, through its superstructure, through its ideologies, through its culture, through its social relations, perpetuates itself. So like when the orthodox Marxists, whoever these orthodox Marxists are, who say like that's not what we should be focusing on, like kind of thing, I don't know why they would describe that as like a non-issue or something not to think about. I think it's important and it's a good point. Reality Pixel Media. Now, I am going to leave it there. So yeah, thank you for everyone who has joined in today. Reality Pixel Media, of course. Ollie Atlas, you've been in a couple of streams now. You're a veteran. 4IS, as always. Jerry Poppins, my God, it must be months since I've seen you in this stream. Welcome back. Who else we got here? Adam, tuning in while at work. Solidarity with you. True representative of the working class. Da Mitten. Don't know if you're still around, but thanks for your contribution. Sick Roach, wow, what a strange interchange that was, an exchange of ideas, but thanks for joining anyway, and saying some things, and the others I won't really mention because I don't think they're meant to actually be here or wanted to be here. So yeah, thank you for everyone who has interacted, and we will be back on Monday, so next week, with another stream. So until next time, please remember, I am, you are, we are a mystery. Enjoy your weekend and thanks for your contributions. Cheers.